The wind howled through the jagged rocks as Kieran made his way along the narrow canyon path. His boots crunched over gravel, and the smell of rain mixed with the sharp scent of metal from his old rifle. He had been walking for hours, hoping to find shelter before nightfall. The mountains here were known for predators, but something else lingered in the air tonight, something wrong. Halfway down the slope, a faint sound reached his ears. It was not the growl of a beast or the hiss of wind. It was softer, strained. A pained whimper. Kieran stopped, heart thudding. The sound came again, echoing between the rocks. He tightened his grip on his rifle, moving slowly toward it. Every step made the sound clearer, until he finally saw it. A massive creature lay half-hidden in the shadows. Its fur was patterned like black fire on silver snow, shimmering faintly in the dim light. Its golden eyes flickered open at his approach, pupils narrowing to thin slits. Blood stained the ground beneath it, and one of its front legs twisted at an unnatural angle. Even injured, it was terrifying, bigger than any predator he had ever seen. Kieran froze. Every instinct told him to turn and run. But then the creature let out another sound, not a roar, not a threat. It was a plea. Its breathing was ragged, and its ears twitched weakly, as if even the effort to lift its head was too much. Kieran lowered his rifle. Against every bit of caution in his mind, he stepped closer. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. Unsure why he was talking to it. The creature's eyes never left his. It was watching him, studying him, as though trying to decide whether he was a threat or a savior. His hands moved to the pouch on his belt where he kept his medkit. He knelt beside it, ignoring the warning growl rumbling in its chest. "Easy. Let me help." The wound was deep, jagged. Whatever had attacked this beast had meant to kill. Kieran cleaned the blood as best he could, his fingers working quickly but carefully. The creature flinched a few times, but did not strike. When he began to bind the leg, its breathing slowed. For the first time since he'd found it, its gaze softened. Kieran almost thought it nodded on by the time the bandages were tight. His hands were covered in blood. The rain began to fall harder, pattering against the rocks around them. He needed to get it out of the open before something else found them. "All right," he murmured. "Let's move you somewhere safe." The beast did not resist as he looped an arm under its shoulder and began to help it stand. Its weight was enormous, but together they stumbled into a shallow cave nearby. Inside, Kieran set down his rifle and started a small fire with the little dry wood he had left. The creature lay down, curling its massive body around itself. In the flickering light, Kieran could see the way its fur caught the glow, making it look like liquid silver in shadows. It watched him constantly, as if still trying to decide what he truly was. Kieran sat across from it, back against the wall. "You'll be all right," he promised, even though he had no idea if that was true. For a moment, there was only the crackle of the fire and the sound of rain outside. Then, slowly, the beast lowered its head onto its paws and closed its eyes. Trust, fragile and uncertain, had been given. That night, Kieran slept lightly. He woke often to the sound of the beast shifting or breathing. Each time, he glanced toward it and saw those golden eyes reflecting the firelight. Each time, he wondered why he had helped. In this part of the galaxy, mercy often led to death. Yet something deep inside told him this act would matter. When dawn came, the rain had stopped. Mist rolled through the canyon, and the fire was nearly out. Kieran packed his gear, wondering what to do next. The creature stirred, its gaze following his every movement. When he stepped toward the cave mouth, it stood slowly and limped after him. "You're coming with me?" he asked, surprised. The beast gave a low rumble that sounded almost like agreement. As they made their way down the canyon together, Kieran could not shake the feeling that eyes were watching them. The air felt heavier now, the silence sharper. Somewhere, far away, a voice of authority demanded answers, and soldiers began to move. The beast he had saved was not just any predator of the wild. It was something far more dangerous. Kieran led the creature down the winding path, his steps cautious. The morning mist clung to his clothes, and every sound seemed to echo in the quiet canyon. The beast limped beside him, moving with surprising grace despite its injuries. Kieran glanced at it now and then, still amazed it hadn't turned on him during the night. Something about its steady golden gaze made him feel watched in more ways than one. They reached a river that cut through the canyon floor. The water was cold and clear, rushing over smooth stones. Kieran knelt to fill his flask, keeping his eyes on the shadows between the trees. This was territory known for scavengers and worse. The beast lowered its head and drank, its black and silver fur rippling with each movement. For a moment, the scene almost felt peaceful. But peace here never lasted. A sharp crack echoed from the ridge above. Kieran's head snapped up. He knew. That sounded a rifle being cocked. Without thinking, he stepped between the beast and the ridge. "Move," he whispered, urging it toward the cover of some rocks. The creature hesitated, its ears twitching, then obeyed. A split second later, a bolt of energy hissed through the air where it had been standing. Kieran cursed under his breath. Whoever was up there wasn't hunting for food. They were aiming for the beast. He grabbed his rifle and fired a warning shot into the rocks above. The echoes rolled through the canyon, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps. Whoever it was, they didn't want to fight right now. That meant they would be back, and next time they wouldn't miss. When the danger passed, Kieran led the beast deeper into the trees. The forest swallowed them in shadows, and the air grew damp and heavy. The creature moved closer to him now, as if sensing that the threat wasn't gone. He could almost feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking their every move. Somewhere out there, someone knew exactly what he was protecting. By midday, they found a small clearing where sunlight spilled through the leaves. Kieran used the chance to check the creature's wound again. The bandages were holding, but it needed real medical care, something far beyond his supplies. "You're lucky you can even walk," he muttered. The beast's golden eyes fixed on him, unblinking, as if it understood every word. It made a low, soft sound that was almost comforting. Kieran's thoughts kept circling back to the attack near the river. No ordinary hunter would risk firing at a target like this unless there was a bounty. And bounties of that scale were usually placed by powerful people who didn't like being crossed. He started to wonder if helping this beast had already signed his death warrant. The sun was setting when they reached the edge of the forest. Ahead, the land opened into wide plains, and in the distance, towers of black stone rose toward the sky. Kieran froze. He had seen those towers before, though never this close. They marked the border of Baroness Avera's domain, a ruler known for her cruelty and wealth. Rumors said she kept strange and dangerous pets, creatures that would tear a man apart on command. A cold realization struck him. The patterns in the beast's fur, the golden eyes, the way it carried itself, even wounded. He had heard stories in distant spaceports about a predator like this, a predator said to belong only to the Baroness herself. If that was true, then saving it hadn't just made him a target. It had put him directly in the path of a woman who would stop at nothing to reclaim what was hers. The beast gave a low growl, looking toward the towers. Kieran tightened his grip on his rifle, scanning the horizon. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think we're both in trouble now." Somewhere beyond those walls, word had already spread. The Baroness's soldiers were mounting up, and the hunt had begun. The plain stretched out before Kieran, golden grass swaying under the cool wind. The beast walked close to him now, its limp more pronounced after the long day. Every so often, it glanced toward the black stone towers in the distance, ears twitching at sounds Kieran couldn't hear. He had no doubt it knew exactly where they were headed and what danger waited there. They kept moving until the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the land. That's when Kieran spotted movement on the horizon. At first, he thought, it was the wind stirring the grass. Then he saw the glint of metal, riders, at least 6 of them, moving in a wide arc to cut off their path. Their armor shimmered black and red under the fading light. Soldiers of the Baroness. Kieran swore under his breath and veered toward a dry creek bed for cover. The beast followed, silent but alert. He crouched low, pulling out a small scope from his belt. Through the glass, he could see their faces cold, disciplined, eyes scanning the plains. These weren't simple scouts. They were trackers. And if they had found them this quickly, it meant someone had been following since the canyon. The soldiers split into pairs, fanning out. One pair was heading straight toward the creek bed. Kieran tightened his grip on his rifle, his mind racing. He couldn't outrun them on foot, not with the beast injured. Fighting them here would draw more. His only hope was to move before they. Locked in on his position, he gave a quick hand signal to the beast, unsure if it would understand. To his surprise, the creature moved ahead, keeping low and slipping between the shadows of the dry riverbank. Its injured leg slowed it, but it moved with purpose, as though it had done this before. Kieran followed, matching its pace. Above them, the sound of hooves grew louder. The pair of soldiers passed directly overhead, scanning the ground. Kieran held his breath, feeling the tension crawl up his spine. The beast's ears flattened, but it made no sound. The soldiers paused, their mounts stamping the ground, then moved on. Kieran exhaled slowly, his pulse still pounding. They had slipped past barely. By nightfall, the towers loomed larger, their black stone lit by flickering red lights. Kieran knew they couldn't get closer without being spotted, so he found shelter in the ruins of an old outpost. The roof was half collapsed, but it kept out the cold wind. He started a small, shielded fire, careful not to let the smoke rise too high. The beast lay beside it, eyes half closed, but still watching him. Kieran studied it in the firelight. There was no denying its strength, even wounded. Its breathing was steadier now, but the injury still needed real treatment. "If I take you to a med station, they'll turn you over to her," he muttered. "If I don't, you'll die." It was a choice he didn't want to make, but the Baroness's riders would force it soon. In the distance, the night carried the faint echo of horns. The sound was deep, rolling, and impossible to mistake. The Baroness's hunt signal. Kieran's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a recovery mission anymore. That sound meant every rider in her domain was now moving toward one target. Him. The beast lifted its head, golden eyes locking on his. It gave a low rumble, not of threat but of warning. Kieran stood, checking his rifle and gear. "All right," he said quietly. "If they want you this bad, there's a reason. And until I know what it is, I'm not handing you over." Somewhere out there, the Baroness was already expecting him to break. She was going to be disappointed. Asterisk. The night was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fire. Kieran didn't sleep. Every shadow outside the ruined outpost felt like a pair of eyes watching. The beast lay curled beside him, its breathing deep and steady, but its ears twitched at every distant sound. Somewhere far beyond the plains, the horn sounded again, closer this time. By dawn, the wind had picked up, carrying the faint smell of smoke. Kieran stepped outside to scan the horizon. To the east, a thin column of black smoke rose against the pale sky. It wasn't from a village, he knew that smell. It was the scorched earth left behind by the Baroness's hunting patrols. They were sweeping the land, burning away places to hide. He returned to the shelter and packed what little he had. The beast stood without being told, its limp more noticeable after the cold night. "We keep moving," Kieran said, though he wasn't sure where safety could be found now. The closer they got to the towers, the more dangerous it became. But moving away meant heading into open plains where they would be spotted instantly. As they made their way along a narrow ridge, the sound of engines broke the morning calm. Kieran pressed against the rocks, pulling the beast with him. A hovercraft passed below, painted in the Baroness's colors, black and red, sharp edges gleaming. In the sun, soldiers stood in the open deck, scanning the ridge with rangefinders. One of them lifted a communicator to his mouth. Even from here, Kieran could see the sharp motion of his arm pointing in their direction. The hovercraft slowed. Kieran didn't think. He grabbed the beast's scruff and pulled it into a narrow gap between boulders. The space was tight, and the air smelled of dust and old stone, but it kept them hidden as the craft passed overhead. The sound of engines faded, replaced by the heavy thud of boots as a squad was dropped nearby. Kieran could hear their voices now cold, clipped and certain. They weren't searching blindly. They knew exactly where to look. He glanced at the beast, whose golden eyes were fixed on the soldiers. It stayed still, but every muscle in its massive body was ready to spring. Kieran raised a hand, urging it to stay calm. A fight here would end with both of them dead. Minutes dragged like hours before the voices finally grew distant. Kieran waited longer still, just in case, before stepping out from the rocks. "They're closing in," he muttered. "Too fast." His thoughts turned to the only possible reason: the Baroness had learned who he was. That would explain why. They weren't just hunting the beast, but him as well. By late afternoon, they reached a line of ancient stone pillars jutting from the earth like broken teeth. The place was silent except for the wind, but Kieran felt the weight of history here. Old markings covered the stone, symbols from a time before the Baroness's rule. He didn't understand them, but the beast stopped and sniffed at one of the pillars as though it recognized the scent. Before Kieran could ask, a voice echoed across the stones, smooth, cold, powerful. "You have something of mine, human." Kieran spun around, rifle raised. A woman stepped from the shadows between two pillars, her cloak flowing like liquid black. Her eyes were the same golden hue as the beast's, but sharper, calculating. Even without an introduction, he knew. The Baroness. She stopped a few paces away, her gaze flicking between Kieran and the creature. "You've shown it mercy. That's rare for your kind," she said. "But mercy does not make it yours." Her voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the warning beneath it. The beast gave a low growl, stepping closer to Kieran, as if claiming him in return. Kieran's heart pounded, but he didn't lower his weapon. It would have died out there. "I wasn't about to leave it." The Baroness tilted her head slightly, as if amused. "And yet, by saving it, you've stolen. If from me, in my lands, that's an insult I do not forget." Her eyes narrowed. "You have one chance, human. Return it, now." The wind tugged at Kieran's jacket as he stood facing the Baroness. Her presence was like a shadow stretching over the stones, cold and unshakable. The beast stayed at his side, muscles tense, its golden eyes locked on her every movement. Kieran's fingers tightened on his rifle, but he knew one wrong twitch could mean both their deaths. "I'm not giving it back," Kieran said, his voice steady. The Baroness's expression did not change, but her eyes darkened. "You speak as though you have a choice." She raised her hand, and from the shadows, soldiers stepped into view, weapons ready. They moved with perfect discipline, surrounding him in a half circle. The hum of charged rifles filled the air like a rising storm. The beast growled, stepping forward, but Kieran held his hand out, stopping it. "If you cared about it, you wouldn't have left it to die," he said. The Baroness's lips curved. In a thin smile, "You misunderstand. I did not leave it to die. I set it free to hunt. If it was injured, it was because it failed me." She glanced at the beast with a look that made Kieran's chest tighten. In my eyes, failure is unforgivable. Her words made the air colder. Kieran understood now. This wasn't a beloved pet to her. It was a possession, a weapon. And she intended to take it back, even if it meant killing him to do it. The soldiers began to close in, boots scraping against stone. Kieran's pulse pounded, and his mind raced for a way out. The beast's fur bristled, and it gave a deep, guttural sound that made the soldiers pause. Kieran could feel the power in that sound. It wasn't fear, it was a warning. Slowly, the creature stepped in front of him, lowering its head and baring sharp, glistening fangs. The Baroness's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something like surprise passing through them. "You dare protect him?" she said to the beast. It did not move, did not blink, as if its answer was already clear. The Baroness let out a slow breath. "So be it. If you choose the human, you choose his fate." She raised her hand again, and the soldiers readied their weapons in unison. The air felt heavy, charged with the moment before violence. Kieran shifted his stance, the butt of his rifle firm against his shoulder. He knew they couldn't win this fight, not against these numbers, but he also knew he wasn't surrendering. "If you want it," he said, "you'll have to come through me." The words hung between them, sharp and final. The Baroness's eyes glinted with something between anger and curiosity. "Very well," she said softly. Then, with a single gesture, she unleashed her soldiers. They surged forward, boots pounding against stone, rifles flashing with bursts of energy fire. The beast roared, the sound echoing across the pillars like thunder, and launched itself at the nearest attacker. The clash was instant and violent, steel and claws. Shouts and gunfire ripping through the quiet morning. Kieran fired in controlled bursts. Each shot aimed to slow them down rather than kill outright. The beast moved like a storm, swiping soldiers off their feet, its injured leg hardly slowing it now. But there were too many. For every one they stopped, two more pushed forward. The Baroness stood perfectly still, watching the fight like it was nothing more than a test she had already judged. Asterisk, the battle raged across the stone pillars, the sound of gunfire and roaring filling the air. Kieran ducked behind a broken slab, as a bolt of energy shattered the rock beside his head. The beast slammed into a soldier, sending him sprawling, then spun to block another shot aimed at Kieran. Even wounded, it fought with terrifying strength, every move an act of defiance. But the soldiers kept coming. Kieran's rifle ran low on power, the hum of its core weakening. He knew they couldn't hold out much longer. Then his eyes landed on the tallest pillar in the center of the ruins, a crumbling spire with a faint pulsing light at its base. It wasn't just stone. It was old tech, maybe from before the Baroness's rule. And from the way her eyes flicked toward it, he could tell it mattered to her. Kieran's mind raced. If he couldn't defeat her soldiers, maybe he could force her hand. He grabbed a charge from his belt, primed it, and bolted toward the pillar. The Baroness saw him move. "Stop him!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. But the beast leapt in the way, intercepting 3 soldiers at once, claws flashing in the dim light. Kieran reached the base of the pillar and slapped the charge against it. The device beeped, the countdown flashing bright red. He turned to face the Baroness, his breath sharp in his chest. "Call them off," he shouted, "or I bring this down." Her soldiers froze, waiting for her command. The Baroness's eyes locked on him, and for the first time, there was no smug control, only calculation. "You would destroy what you don't understand?" she asked, her voice steady but tense. Kieran shook his head. "I don't need to understand it. I just need to know it's yours." The seconds ticked down, the pulsing light of the pillar growing faster. The beast stepped to his side, still snarling at the soldiers, as if it understood the choice about to be made. The Baroness's jaw tightened. Then, with a sharp gesture, she signaled her soldiers to lower their weapons. The air seemed to ease, but her voice was like ice. Take it then. If it chooses you over me, it's no longer mine. But remember this, human, you've made an enemy you cannot escape." Her gaze lingered on the beast, and for a moment, something like loss flickered. In her eyes, Kieran deactivated the charge and stepped back from the pillar. The beast moved closer to him, its massive head brushing his shoulder. The Baroness turned and walked away, her soldiers following without another word. When they were gone, the wind rushed through the ruins again, carrying only silence. Kieran looked down at the beast. "Guess it's just us now." The creature huffed softly, its golden eyes steady on his. Whatever it had been before, it wasn't the Baroness's weapon anymore. It had made its choice. And so had he. Together, they turned from the ruins and walked into the open plains, knowing that somewhere out there, the Baroness's shadow still stretched across the stars, but for now, they were free.